Hey minions, welcome to Crank It Up. I'm Jim Price, and on this episode of Action Awareness, I want to talk about Cabover Pete of the Truckers. Cabover Pete is one of the Trucker double features. It's a play on base action that has a very interesting talent. You can transfer this action to another base to transfer or move another card you control here to the same base. Cabover Pete mentions the word another card, and like Purge the Demon, was one of the cards I mentioned being fairly future-proof. I ranked it number 1 on my top 10 list of cards most impacted by Titans, which I'll get to in a bit, but it turns out this card is more future-proof than you may have realized. As a play-on-base action, it fits perfectly into the Trucker strategy. The Truckers want to deliver minions and actions to their proper destination, and have a great means to spread out before converging later. Unlike Zeppelin, which is flexible in that it can move a minion to one of two bases, Cabover Pete can move a minion to any base so long as Cabover Pete is on the same base. It's like having a personal shuttle for your minion. But the action moves with the minion, which is great because it matters to cards like Rubber Chicken or Convoy. I love how El Bandito can send Cabover Pete to go grab whatever card you need, because El Bandito can move over Cabover Pete, and Cabover Pete can move them both to the proper destination, and El Bandito doesn't have to be on either base. And it doesn't just have to be minions. You can transfer actions. This is great because it can lead to some really fun combinations. While there were other cards that could relocate actions, no other card to this point does it so cleanly. I've used Cabover Pete on base 1 to bring Decatura over to base 2, so Decatura can bring 3 minions over to base 3. And because there are 2 copies, there's plenty of transferring to go around. When you transfer an action with Cabover Pete, neither action may provide power, but you give yourself a last-minute 4 power with Rally as long as you have a minion there. As a double feature, you can transfer both cards and have both transfer actions, making Rally give at least 8 power, which is pretty insane for a last-minute special card. I love movement because it fits my playstyle of using the board to my advantage while converging on a target later on. And Cabover Pete is the perfect movement card because of its flexibility, which includes Titans. Titans are cards, so you can move them. Very few Titans are actually mobile. Mergicon is, but loses all of his power as a result. Kraken doesn't increase your power, so it doesn't help you break a base. But there are a number of Titans who soak up power and can't move. Now Cabover Pete can use them as base breakers. For example, the very large boulder used to be able to move, but only to follow a minion and would end up destroying a minion with less power. But if the Titan itself moves, its ongoing ability won't trigger and you'll get a pure power addition. For those Titans that are difficult to bring into play, Cabover Pete makes it easier to keep them in play for the entire game. I love how the Great Wolf Spirit replaces El Bandito's role in turning Cabover Pete into the personal shuttle, as he can use the first talent to go to the base to get the card, and then the second talent to move it wherever you want. The only stipulation is that it has to be a card you control, and a player doesn't control bases. But a player can control a buried card, so can Cabover Pete move it? The answer is yes, despite the rulebook not being clear on this. Currently, move only affects minions and Titans, whereas actions and power counters are transferred. But I asked about this specifically and was told that it does work. We just aren't sure how yet, whether it's a move or a transfer. I would want it personally to be a transfer, since you'd either have to specifically mention buried cards as being moved, as opposed to cards. If you can move cards, why transfer actions since actions are cards? Regardless, buried cards don't have to stay buried there, and that can be a really interesting outcome. Typically, excessive burying forces you to overcommit on a base, but this allows you to utilize your Pyramid Engineers for extra plays elsewhere. If you don't like any of your options with your mummies, you don't have to wait for them to be uncovered before transferring them to the replacement base. It's a very flexible outcome for a flexibly worded card. But my favorite use for Cabover Pete is to continue using cards that have served their purpose on the base. And there are a ton of use cases for this, and I can only highlight some of my favorites. I used to do this a lot with Rules Lawyer, but that forces me to play the geeks and it costs me my action. Cabover Pete solves both problems. Not only can I persist the Leprechaun after he's walled off my base, but I can keep the Enshrouding Mist that helped expedite the base quickly. 2 Cabover Petes and 2 lunch runs can be devastating, because the halflings play a lot of minions and you want the sustained engine to be drawing 2 cards every turn. In fact, every good buddy is 3 cards. One of the problems with the halflings is that they have limited recursion and can burn through minions quickly, particularly when they are lower powered, but when you are consistently drawing more cards than you are playing, you'll never run out. Cabover Pete is also a great means for grabbing that extra minion from Shire Marshal, or for transferring that convoy over to the base where you were losing to steal it from another player. I've mentioned before how I like to keep Been and Gone in the entire game to keep El Bandito in play. This is especially powerful because El Bandito can play the extra cards that the clerics retrieve, so you can persist Been and Gone and another powerful action while using the Cardinal to retrieve everyone else. The dragons function on the principle that an opposing player is forced to pick their poison, but you can pick it for them. Instead of playing runes where you don't want them to go, you can bring it to where they went. Transferring Bring Down the Walls can give you the minion you need for Rally to be effective, and you can quickly go from no presence on the base to winner. But my absolute favorite play, which is not hard to pull off, is to repeatedly transfer Overgrowth to break and win a base every turn. The way this works is that Overgrowth triggers for the current base, then is transferred so that the next base will trigger next turn. This works incredibly well against factions that have no specials, because as long as you are winning, you will win that base. And they have no idea which base will be your next target, which will force them to either spread out, which increases the chances of them losing, or have them try to compete on their single turn. When you consider that Skinny Mini can help transport sleep spores, it's really easy for you to maintain your advantage since you always have 2 turns to manipulate it. All you really need is time to set this up with a few cards, and again, because of Rally, it's not that hard to win the final Overgrowth base. What makes this such a fun combination is that the Venus Mantrap has an excellent target in Good Buddy, thinning out the deck by 2 cards every turn. Skinny Mini is an excellent Sprout target. Combine that with Water Lily, and it feels like an inevitability that this combination will fire, so your opponents will have to beat you quickly or hope for a disenchant. I love El Bandito for many reasons, and he can also transfer actions, but Cabover Pete is the ultimate flexibility. Minions, actions, titans, buried cards, future cards we don't even know about yet, it can move them all. This is the type of utility I want to see in my double features, because you can build entire strategies around it. I think it's really thematically fitting that the truckers are the perfect faction to persist your engine-style cards, and until this point, actions were truly left behind. The only thing it can't really do is move a play on minion action, but we had to draw the line somewhere. This is an ability that will remain relevant always, and I love that. What do you think of Cabover Pete? Do you have a favorite card that you'd like to persist? Let me know in the comments. That's it for this week. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Let's shut it down.